Our next speaker is Michelle Fahy. Michelle is a researcher and writer investigating some of the murky corners of the relationship between global weapons corporations and the Australian government. Her work has brought to light significant revolving door appointments and other forms of undue influence which are known precursors to corruption. Michelle's been published in Declassified Australia, Michael West Media, Arena Magazine, Progressive International and others. She's currently working on a website that reveals and explains the many revolving door appointments of former defence-related politicians, public officials and military officers into the weapons industry in Australia. My pleasure to introduce Michelle.
Thank you, David. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to take the conversation off to a different area, talking about corruption mostly. The arms trade is known for being one of the most corrupt of all legal international trades. UK research shows that this corruption drives and distorts arms procurement decisions. Arms purchases that were not previously being considered suddenly appear on the agenda. Before delving into AUKUS, an egregious distortion in Australian defence procurement, I'll briefly discuss the original French submarine contract. French multinational Naval Group had been wrangling with Malcolm Turnbull's government for almost 2 years to get the formal contract signed. In August 2018, Scott Morrison became our PM. Soon after, Naval Group hired David Gazzard, a lobbyist, a former Liberal candidate, and a close friend of Scott Morrison. Within months, the Morrison government had signed the contract. Neither Gazzard nor Naval Group would answer any questions about the process or how much Gazzard was paid. Naval Group was, at that time, under investigation for corruption in 3 other arms deals, 2 for submarines, Pakistan and Malaysia, and 1 for frigates, Taiwan. The Turnbull government would have known this when putting Naval Group on the shortlist. These were not minor corruption cases. Murder was involved in all of them. A 4th corruption investigation, submarines for Brazil, was added after Australia had signed its contract with Naval Group. How did the Turnbull and Morrison governments shortlist, select and sign a contract with a company being investigated in 4 separate corruption cases? Such is the MO of Australia's Defence Department. BAE Systems Australia is Defence's largest contractor and has been for 6 of the last 8 years. BAE Systems is a significant beneficiary of AUKUS. It has already been handed a £3.95 billion contract for the design and development of the AUKUS submarines. BAE Systems also provides perhaps the best known example of systematic, high-level arms industry corruption. Britain's series of arms deals with Saudi Arabia was and remains its biggest ever arms deal. It earned BAE Systems at least £43 billion in revenue between 1985 and 2007, with further deals still ongoing. The deal included £6 billion in bribes paid to the Saudi royal family. In addition, during the 1990s and the 2000s, in a deliberate choice that came from the top, BAE Systems maintained a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands that was called Red Diamond Trading. This vehicle channelled hundreds of millions of pounds of bribes around the globe to key decision makers in a succession of arms deals. You can see The Guardian's BAE files, which contain 15 years reporting on this subject. There are also numerous books about it, and if you're interested, come and see me after and I'll let you know what they are. Now let's consider Australia's largest ever surface warship acquisition, the Hunter-class frigates, which are being designed and built by BAE Systems. Our national auditor was scathing of this procurement process. Last May, the Audit Office noted numerous serious governance failures, including key documents going missing. The primary legislative requirement of providing taxpayers with value for money had been completely ignored. After the release of the audit report, I did some more digging and uncovered serious conflicts of interests. Among other things, Defence had appointed former senior BAE staff and advisors into important roles overseeing the evaluation of tenders, without making those appointments public. Defence also hired one of those former senior BAE staff to negotiate the frigate deal with BAE on behalf of Defence. Not joking. More detail about this extraordinary story is in my Substack archive, and again, if you're interested, I can give it to you later. It has also been revealed that BAE Systems was handed this Hunter-class frigate contract despite long-running concerns inside Defence about BAE's alleged inflation of invoices by tens of millions of dollars on the earlier Adelaide class of frigates. Detailed allegations of this fraud in the Adelaide class contracts, that's hard to say, including by Thales Australia, were published in 3 separate articles by the Weekend Australian in May 2019. A Defence internal audit had reportedly found that BAE's contract was riddled with cost overruns, with the British company consistently invoicing questionable charges. Defence launched a second investigation. 18 months later, I asked Defence about the outcome of its second investigation. This was their response, and I quote, "An independent internal review of this matter found no evidence of inappropriate excess charges by BAE and Thales. The investigation did find some minor administrative issues which have been subsequently addressed through additional training. This training is now part of our normal cycle and is routinely refreshed." End of quote. The independent review was conducted in secret by an existing Defence contractor. His report was not made public. Defence said no evidence was found of inappropriate excess charges, yet the allegations were apparently so serious they were referred to Defence's Assistant Secretary of Fraud Control, who then referred several matters even further up the chain. Yet all this happened on the basis of no evidence, apparently. Recently, I have been collaborating with UK colleagues trying to uncover more about the Adelaide class contracts. Numerous freedom of information requests have been lodged, and Defence has blocked them all, refusing to release a single page. We submitted an appeal. Defence blocked that too. We have now appealed to the Information Commissioner. If this was merely a minor administrative issue that was resolved by additional training, what I want to know is why is all this aggressive blocking of information happening through FOI? I will finish by briefly outlining a mini case study of undue influence and the revolving door, that of the former CEO of BAE Systems Australia, Jim McDowell. Importantly, I am not implying any illegality on the part of Mr. McDowell. I am simply laying out an array of his government appointments to highlight the extensive influence that just one person can have. Jim McDowell had a 17-year career with BAE Systems, including a decade as its chief executive in Australia. Then, for 2 years, he ran its lucrative Saudi Arabian business. He resigned from BAE in Saudi Arabia at the end of 2013, December 2013. In 2014, Mr McDowell was appointed by the Coalition to a 4-person panel undertaking the first principles review of defence. This review recommended sweeping reforms to the Defence Department, including its procurement processes, which have largely benefited major arms companies. In 2015, the Coalition Government appointed McDowell to another 4-person expert advisory panel. This one was overseeing the tender process for that original submarine contract, which ultimately went to Naval Group. When he announced McDowell as being part of this panel, the then Defence Minister Kevin Andrews did not mention McDowell's history with BAE Systems, which had ended only 18 months earlier. It was highly relevant because BAE designs and manufactures Britain's submarines, but that information was kept hidden. In late 2016, the then Defence Industry Minister, Christopher Pyne, hired McDowell as his advisor to develop and write the Naval Shipbuilding Plan. The appointment was not announced publicly. At that time, McDowell was also on the board of Australian shipbuilder Austal. Under the shipbuilding plan, Austal subsequently won a contract to build 6 more Cape-class patrol boats, and of course, BAE Systems won the biggest prize, the Hunter-class frigate contract. After the frigate deal was announced, South Australian Premier Steve Marshall hired Jim McDowell to head his Department of Premier and Cabinet. South Australia was the state that gained the most from the shipbuilding plan. McDowell stayed there for a couple of years, and then he left the South Australian Public Service to become the CEO of Nova Systems, which is a key defence contractor. Last year, Jim McDowell moved back through the revolving door again into a senior role with the Defence Department. He is now Deputy Secretary for Naval Shipbuilding and Sustainment, reporting directly to the Defence Secretary, Greg Moriarty. When appointed, McDowell said his new role was an opportunity he couldn't turn down because it provides the ability for me to shape the future of Australia's shipbuilding and sustainment. In my view, McDowell's long list of, and there are many I didn't mention, his long list of sensitive senior appointments should not have been possible. He cannot be the only person in the country who is qualified to have undertaken each of these roles. So, that was a very brief run-through of aspects of the undue influence of the arms industry in Australia. I decided to raise this tonight in this context because there has been almost no commentary about the likely influence of the arms industry in the AUKUS deal. Thank you.